Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is hautemesstom and thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you are new to my channel is all about loving my makeup collection as it currently is, being critical of new makeup releases, and when I decide to bring something into my makeup collection or to give it a try, being very considerate about what that is and why I'm bringing that into my collection in order to try to not bring just things into my collection senselessly. If that sounds good to you, I would love to have you subscribe and make sure you like this video before heading out. A few months ago, maybe in February, March, there was a restock of the Sonia G Fusion brushes. I had just gotten a raise from my job and I was like, I should treat myself. And so, removing the rules of my budget, I bought myself the Fusion set and additionally one other brush from Sonia G. I had been wanting to try Sonia G brushes because I watch Michelle Wong and she praises these brushes to the high heaven. She talks about Sonia G so much, just a lot. Almost any brush that she uses on her channel, she's either pulling out a Sonia G brush or something that looks just like a Sonia G brush because that one was designed to like mimic a Sonia G brush. She also uses like Rephr and some Westman Atelier brushes, but the brushes that she seemingly reaches for the most are Sonia G brushes. And one of the brushes that I bought is like a brush that I had on my list for a long time because Michelle was talking about it so much. Personally, along my makeup journey, I have kind of learned the value of a good tool. Now, that is not to say that if you are someone who loves makeup and you cannot afford like luxury brushes or brushes handmade in Japan, that you can't do your makeup just as well as I can. All I have learned is that having a very good tool, having a very good brush designed to do what you're asking it to do makes makeup application not only easier but also faster. And this happened with my eye makeup skills whenever I upgraded from Morphe brushes to Wayne Goss brushes. Literally, my blending improved tenfold. It was much easier to blend just because of the tool. I just didn't have to fuss as much. And now some people enjoy the process of using things and like tweaking things around, but when I apply makeup, I want it to feel seamless, and I have noticed, for the most part, this is just my experience in upgrading my brushes to something more expensive, handmade in Japan, like this has been my experience with it. So I thought, none of my base brushes or anything like that. I would really love to have some good base brushes, but I also have a lot of cream products in my collection that I felt like I wasn't loving as much, or I could love more, because while I don't mind using my fingers as an application tool, and they work really well, especially for creams, I just don't like having stuff on my hands. So I thought that my first foray into the Sonia G brushes would be the Fusion set. Now, the Fusion set is specific because it uses both natural hair and synthetic fibers together to be the best to work for creams and liquids. Now, it doesn't mean you can't use them for powders, but the way they were designed were with creams and liquids in mind. And so that is why whenever this particular set came back into stock, I just bought the set. And again, in addition to another brush, which you will also see in this video. And I just wanted to report back my thoughts and feelings because these brushes are not inexpensive. They are rather pricey brushes. So I want to report back and tell you which ones I think were worth it, which ones I felt like when I used them for the first time that like first time and repetitively. I've had these for months. These have been the brushes that I've been using a lot, not exclusively, because I will tell you now that they're not all 100% winners to me, but I want to go through them and just kind of discuss which ones I think are worth it, which ones aren't, my experience with each brush. So we're going to do that. What I'm going to do is I will put information about the brush, like how much it costs and the type of hair that it is. All of them are the same type of hair. I just, off the top of my head, don't know that, and I did not do notes for this. That's why I'm going to do that all in post, show you the pricing. And also, who knows, the pricing could be different now than when I bought them initially. So recap, I've been using these for quite some time. It's July. I believe I bought them in February or January. So I've been at least had like 5 to 6 months is how long I've been playing with them. So it's not like I jumped right into reviewing them. So I was going to talk about the brushes in the order in which I would use them on my face. And I also have footage of me showing you close-ups of the brushes and me using that brush to apply the piece of makeup I have on today. So let's talk about it. The first brush I used today was the Sonia G Jumbo Base. This is, I'll tell you this now, this is my favorite brush that I bought from Sonia G. This is it. Now, there is a brush from BK Beauty, I think it's the 101, that is kind of designed pretty similarly, but I do believe the brush head on the BK brush is much larger than this, but it has that same shape. So it is mostly domed. It's mostly domed, but it also has almost like an angle, but unlike a contour brush where the angle is long ways, the angle is short ways. And I find that whenever you're applying foundation and like pulling and, you know, buffing things out, it really allows itself to just like being the perfect fit for my face. Now, maybe if you have a smaller face or a less round face, maybe this wouldn't be ideal for you. It might take up too much surface space, but for my face shape, I have found this to be just the brush that I want to reach for every time I'm putting on foundation. I have used it with every single foundation that I own, and it is by far and away the premier foundation brush that I own. Some other brushes I own the one from Pat McGrath. I own this one from Sephora. And I also have this one from my Mud makeup kit. This is like not the same thing, but I like this. The only thing I prefer this brush for is for something like very, very serumy and very, very light. But this one still works for those. I just like having that one around. Now, in a dream world, I have 4 of these because I would say maybe the downside to this foundation brush, and you know, commentary on me as a makeup consumer, makeup user, obviously not as like a professional makeup artist, is like, I'm not washing my brush after every wash, right? So I will say like, I can use this brush like up to 5 to 6 times before the product catches too much on the bristles, and then it's no longer at its peak performance. Whereas my Pat McGrath brush and my Sephora foundation brushes, I can use them quite a few times before I feel like I get to the point where the amount of product that is sitting in the brush really alters it. Now, I try to wash my brushes every 2 weeks. That's my goal, and that's like a realistic goal because I think every week for me is too frequently. Also, like, be aware that like I don't have super sensitive skin. I do have like a little friend on my cheek today. I don't really know where she came from. So yeah, I would say that's like my only qualm about this is that like I have to wash it a bit more than some of my other brushes that I use for liquid foundation. However, in a perfect world, I would buy 3 more of these, get rid of all of my other foundation brushes, and then just like have this be the foundation brush that I just use exclusively. And I'm comfortable saying that. It is honestly, truly like my favorite Sonia G brush that I tried. The bristles, and this is, I'm gonna say this now and just carry this information with you through all the brushes. The bristles are so soft, and they're not really super densely packed. Like they obviously are more dense at the bottom, but they have a little more give on the top, which I really think helps with buffing. I've never, with the clean brush or like a few uses in, ever had any kind of streak marks from the foundation with using this brush. I just think that the way that this brush was designed, like, feels very similar almost to like the application using a sponge. Because sometimes I'll use a foundation brush and then I will see some streaks or some like, you know, texture that it added, and I will just buff it out with like a wet sponge. I don't have to do that with this. So this being the Jumbo Base is like truly the star of the show for me. And if I were to recommend you try any of them, if you were only wanting to try one from this collection, this would be the one I would recommend. However, there are some other winners in this show. Let's talk about the second brush that I used today. So the second brush I used was the Soft Concealer brush. This brush is more like a paintbrush, I would say. It has a domed top, and the bristles are a little bit longer than another concealer brush we will see, or maybe just about as long. So what I think that this brush is ideal for, and I don't know if this is what Sonia G designed this brush for, but it's definitely like getting into the inner corner of the under eye and kind of just blending out here, and I will use it on my nose sometimes. I had a Sephora brush that was very similar in shape to this, and if you are a member of my Patreon, you already kind of know my feelings on these brushes because I did a video for them quite some time ago because I wasn't ready to talk about them on my channel because they were still newer to me. But what I did is half of my face with my Sonia G brushes and then the other half of my face with like the equivalent brush that I already had. And one thing I can say about this is that my experience with this was not like any way better than using the one I owned from Sephora. So in my opinion, like with me saying that is like, this is not a brush that I would really recommend you going out to buy if you have a concealer brush you already like. I bought the whole set, like I bought it as a set, and I think if retrospectively, knowing what I knew now, I would not have bought this particular brush from Sonia G. That doesn't mean that its performance isn't really good. It is, but the performance wasn't better than what I already had, and therefore kind of making it a purchase that I didn't need to make. And if you have never bought Sonia G brushes, they do sell them together as a set, but there is no discount. You get no monetary benefit from buying them as a set. It is the same price as if you bought each one individually. So it's like I could have just skipped this one and saved, you know, however much this particular brush costs. So what I would say to you is, like, if for whatever reason the concealer brush that you are currently using is that bristles are falling out or something like that, and like you are just like kind of over it and you really were looking to upgrade, I could see this being something that would be worth upgrading to. But if not, like, the Sephora Pro brushes work just as well. They had one just shaped like this, and it's like not my favorite brush. It certainly isn't my favorite brush, but we're going to talk about another concealer brush. If I was to buy either one of the concealer brushes again, it would certainly be this one over the one that we will talk about next. The next brush we have is the Jumbo Concealer Brush. Unlike the soft concealer brush, this brush has more, you know, more space. It takes up more space. It's a little bit bigger, and it's also a little bit more flat. And I would say that this one is more densely packed than the soft concealer brush. What I'm imagining Sonia G designed this brush for is if you are someone who spot conceals, that this would be the brush that you would use to spot conceal versus this one, which is better for concealer underneath your eyes and like maybe not so much spot concealing. Not that you can't use both for both things, but I just think that that was the idea behind them. Can't corroborate that with words from Sonia G, but that was the feeling that I got. So I'm not big on spot concealing. Like I said, I have like a little bump on my cheek today, and I don't take the time to spot conceal. I don't often have breakouts, so it's just not something that I feel like doing. And having minor imperfections show through foundation, concealer, etc. is not it's not a big concern of mine. With that being said, this brush was kind of useless to me. However, I did find a use for it that I like, but it can't do the entire job. But what I really like this brush for, because of the fact that it is flat and kind of makes a line here, I really like using it with cream contour and painting on the cream contour onto my cheeks and then also underneath my chin. However, this would take a really long time to blend that out with. So what I actually normally do is I use another Sonia G brush that I normally use for bronzer, which we'll talk about in a second. Or for today's purposes, I used a different foundation brush to buff that out. So yeah, I like this for placing contour, but just like the soft concealer brush, I probably wouldn't have bought this brush. This shape really wasn't necessary to me, and normally for cream contour, I don't mind putting it on with my fingers and blushing out with a brush. So it does remove the hand step, which is what I was, desperately looking to remove, the process of using my fingers whenever I am doing makeup application. It's just like, it's not worth it enough for me to have gone out and bought it. But do I use it every time I use cream contour? Yes. So it is I'm getting my money's worth out of it, but I had to find a creative way to use it because the ways I think this was intended to be used doesn't benefit me. So next up is the Classic Base. This is a more traditional, larger, round, domed, and I believe this is meant to be a foundation brush. It's very similar in shape to my Pat McGrath foundation brush. However, it is just a little bit smaller in circumference. So I actually found a use for this, and then I have never stopped using it that way. I'm sure because it's called the Classic Base, you could use it for foundation. Never once have I used it for foundation. I use it for cream bronzer, and that is perfect. So one of my qualms about cream bronzer is just I felt like I never have control over the pigmentation of it. A lot of cream bronzers pack a real punch immediately whenever you're putting them on your skin, and blending them is depending on the formula, a little more difficult. I love to use this with every single cream bronzer that I have, and it also has changed my opinion about a few cream bronzers that I would have decluttered had I not bought this. I have the Tan Bronze Quad from Natasha Denona, and every time I used it, I always felt like my bronze was so heavy, like in an editorial way, and like sexy, but perhaps maybe not my suggested use of bronzer, as I'm so fair skinned that like whenever I would use it, I would just feel like I was doing something inappropriate, even though that wasn't my intention. Using this with that product changed the game. It made it so much better, and I actually now love using that product. I also have a Burberry face palette that has a cream bronzer in it, and I always felt like that bronzer is really intense, and it is more intense than the bronzer I have on right now, which is the Le Beige from Chanel Healthy Glow bronzer. But what I have found that this does, it just evenly disperses bronzer just so perfectly onto my skin. I just feel like if I didn't have this, my cream bronzers would not look as well loved as they do. So I have the Healthy Glow bronzer out, so I'll just show you. I have quite the dent going in here. Now I'm just going from the middle, so you can still see like the print from the swirl on the outside, but in that center there, I have quite a little dome going inward because I use this nearly every time I do a makeup application. I normally have to, when I realize I haven't used a powder bronzer in a while, I like have to force myself to use it because this brush really changed my mind about a lot of my cream products. And I appreciate that. Now, I usually would do cream bronzers with like a sponge. I would do it with my fingers, but that was a little too intense a lot of the time. So I'd use a sponge. But like, I kind of have moved away from a sponge as far as applications go, unless I'm doing a foundation review. But here's what I'll say. Because of the way that this beautifully disperses my bronzer, I can only imagine it doing the same with your foundation. I can only imagine it doing the same with your foundation because it's been such a pleasant experience using this for my bronzer. And what's beautiful about this is that I did not have a brush to use for cream bronzer before this collection. Now that I have it, I just like can't see myself going back. Like I just truly, truly adore this brush specifically for bronzer. Now I keep saying specifically for bronzer because don't get it twisted, I just like never used it for foundation or anything else, and it would be a little bit too big for the way I like to do my blush to use this as a blush brush. Works really well for, you know, using the bronzer the way I use bronzer. So this one's a huge win, and I think if you are someone who has some cream bronzers and you always feel like they're so pigmented and that they don't disperse really well and the brushes that you use aren't doing it for you, and you would like really want something that's going to, then I think that this is 100% worth the money. And I'm going to ask any of because I know some of my subscribers also have this set. If you use this for foundation, let me know if you really love this as a foundation brush or what you use this brush for. This is the classic base. So far, the jumbo base and the classic base are like, love them. And the last brush from the Pro Fusion collection is the mini base. So it is essentially the classic base, literally smaller. So it has the domed top, but just a much smaller circumference once you get it this way. So for comparison's sake, that's how much smaller it is. If you have a smaller face or you have smaller contours to work with, and that's what you want to use this for, I think this would be really great for a contour brush if you want to use it that way. But what I like it for is cream blush. Now, much like my cream bronzer situation, I have lots of cream blushes and I normally would tap them into my skin with my fingers. Again, trying to remove finger application from being like my primary method of applying creams, or putting it on with my fingers and blending it out with a sponge. And those were the two ways that I would really normally apply it. Much like with my bronzer, this has changed the way I feel about a lot of my cream blushes, because a lot of the time when I use my fingers, I felt like I got too intense and sometimes it would be hard to blend out. Again, formula depending, but the way that this disperses product. So today I actually use the Westman Atelier stick. I show it to you when I drag it on my skin and then blend it out with the brush, and then I also show you me picking it up with the brush and then tapping it into my skin. Now I always kind of like, once I have product on these, I like to stipple it in as opposed to just like, you know, dragging it. Like I'll just stipple it on and then I'll start doing that motion, you know, just to finish off blending. But man, the way I love all my cream blushes now. So I have this blush I like a lot more with this than I did like using it with my fingers. I get so much mileage out of my cream blushes with this, like, oh my god. And like obviously with a cream blush, a lot of them are super pigmented, so you don't even need to like, you just are kind of like tapping this into the product and then just like putting it on. And it's perfect. It's perfect. If I could go back and I was only going to buy the brushes that I loved from this collection, I would only buy the base brushes. So the jumbo base, the classic base, and the mini base would be what I would go back and buy. So I talked about this one holding foundation and it doesn't perform as well as you put foundation on it. I don't have similar products with these, but I'm using these with creams and I'm using this with liquids. So that might be just something to note, you know, with liquid product, maybe the buildup just builds up a little bit faster just because of the type of product that it is. But that being said, these are 100% worth my money. I would buy backups of these. I really like them. Like, I like them a lot, and I have found only value in these. But the concealer brushes could really miss me. I only would suggest for you to buy the concealer brushes, or even start considering to buy the concealer brushes if you are just really unhappy with the way your concealer brushes perform. But if you are okay, even just okay with the way your concealer brushes perform, I do not see these as something that are going to blow your mind upgrading to them. The foundation brushes are a different story. The base brushes like completely changed a lot of the way that I felt about my application methods and are very, very worth it. Now, my channel is all about keeping our collection small. I am not telling you that if you were not thinking about buying brushes, that these are the brushes that you need to go get. But also, there are some alternatives to brushes like this. So BK brushes is like a great vegan alternative. They only use synthetic bristles in their brushes. So if you are looking for an option that does not include any natural hair, I would say BK brushes would be something for you to check out. I cannot speak to the quality personally, but I've had subscribers tell me, and I have seen many other creators on this platform really, really enjoy the quality of a BK brush. Also, Refer is a great way to try these style of brushes without spending a butt ton of money on them. Now, I don't know if Refer specifically has anything that mimics Sonia G brushes, but I know they have a lot of brushes that mimic other brushes that are in this feud style. I still have one more brush to talk to you about, and that is the Smooth Buffer brush. So this is not part of the Pro Fusion collection. This is a brush that I bought because of Michelle Wong, and specifically this brush. The Smooth Buffer, and I believe it had a different name when Michelle, I think it was called like the Face one, but I'm fairly certain that this is the same brush because it has the same look and appearance that the one that Michelle had. And what I saw Michelle use this brush for the first time was the Guerlain Meteorites balls. If you know, you know. And she talked about how whenever she used this with that product and buffed it into her skin, she really saw a difference because she didn't like that product until she did. I have a few finishing powders that I didn't think I fully understood. And I thought, wow, I wonder if that brush would resolve some of those things. And I gotta tell you that it did, but with only specific powders. So I wouldn't really use this with a loose powder. I would use this with something that would be like classified as a finishing powder. So Hourglass has the finishing powder Dim Light, which I own. This is really great for dim light. I found that when I would sweep dim light on my face, I didn't really see the effect, but whenever I would take this, really get product on it and then buff it into the skin, that I saw something completely different with that finishing powder, and it just has such a beautiful finish. Another thing that I like to use this with as opposed to something with a fluffier brush is the blurring powder from Chantecaille. This is pressed pretty tightly and it has like a little bit of a weird consistency, and I find that like getting this brush in there and swirling on and like really like stippling and then kind of like packing it into my skin, that I really see the blurring effect much more with this brush than I do with something that is packed a little bit loosely. For finishing powders before, I would use this brush. And so this is what I'm talking about. It's not very super tightly packed, whereas this one, it's very dense and you have some give on the top, but there's just a lot of give here. I just think getting these types of products like right into the skin, directly packing them into it, is really the way to go as opposed to sweeping, whereas I prefer to sweep like a loose powder all over my skin. That's really what I like to do. Now, I did have a brush like this from Wet n Wild because I wanted to try this shape of brush before I committed to this. And it worked as well, and I liked it for the finishing powders, but the quality of this versus Wet n Wild is just like, it's not even close. Like, Wet n Wild cannot touch the quality of this. And so I really like this, but I wouldn't, if I never saw Michelle Wong talk about this, I probably wouldn't have looked at this brush twice. I'm very happy to have it in my collection. I use it almost every time I do my makeup. If I'm just Because sometimes I will just use the blurring powder, but sometimes, you know, you need I think like this adds a little more longevity to my makeup. So I'm just saying, like, I don't know that like this is something you need to run out and need, but if you are someone who loves finishing powders, so if you like have the Hourglass, the ambient lighting powders, or if you have this and you kind of wondered, I don't see the blur, this would be something that I could see using. But you have to be really committed to the products you want to use this with, because I think if I didn't have those types of pressed finishing powders, then this would mean nothing to me. Like, and I wouldn't know what to use it for. Like, I assume it can make a great blush brush, but that's not what I bought it for. And it works really well for what the specific thing that I really wanted this for. So it worked really well for that. And so it's considered a win to me. Let me just finish some final thoughts on the Sonia G brushes that I bought. Some of them can be really life-changing, and I bet that's across the board. And I bet if you know, use something like a Morphe brush or a Wet n Wild brush for your eyeshadow and you tried Sonia G's other brushes, you'd be really pleased with them. But like for me, I have some Wayne Goss brushes, and I'm not sure that the quality would be incredibly different enough, other than maybe some specific shapes that Sonia G has that Wayne Goss doesn't have. But I really do think if you have the money and it's not going to set you back a lot, and you have been thinking about investing more money in your brushes, I do think that upgrading to something like Sonia G or Wayne Goss is really worth it. I think you're gonna really feel and experience the difference of using a really, really high quality brush with the products you already have. Even if you're using a Wet n Wild blush or you're using, you know, an e.l.f. eyeshadow palette, I just think your products are gonna feel like they're working better for you, because the tool that you are using with them increases the just how good the product feels on the skin and looks on the skin. I will also say this specifically about the Sonia G brushes. I have washed them many times. I've had them for almost 6 months, if not 6 months. And what I can say to you is that I'm not sure that a single bristle has fallen out of them. They are really high quality, and I'm very vigorous with my washing when I do wash them. I have one of those Sigma pads, and I use Black African soap. There's a lot of swirling. And you know, and I also have found that even with the foundation brushes, they're like rather easy to clean. Sometimes a foundation brush, you know, because of how densely packed they are with the way they are designed, it's sometimes hard to get all of the foundation out of them. And I don't feel that I have to struggle like that when I am using the Sonia G brushes. But I think that's where my thoughts on this end. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you were new to Sonia G brushes and I was helpful in any way, I would love to have you subscribe. I can help you through some other decisions that you want to make in the makeup world, and I would love to be the person who does that for you. Please make sure you like this video before leaving, and if you feel so inclined to share it with a friend, go ahead and do that. I'm also on Patreon if you would like to support me there. And I would like to say one thing before I leave. Thank you to anyone who took the time to nominate me throughout the month of June. I really appreciate it. The results of whether or not I got nominated probably won't come until the end of July, so I'll keep you posted, but I just really wanted to thank you for doing that. If you want to follow me on Instagram, that's linked down below. I've been doing that like ask me anything, not gonna lie thing, and I've been having a good time with that. It's a really great way to get into my psyche if you ever wanted to get there. I don't know why you would, but people seem to be enjoying my responses, and people have been enjoying my stories recently. And I say that like just like as I'm shocked, because I mostly look like a bum in them, and you know, I don't really try to curate a life that I like really don't live whenever I'm doing that. Like, I've been told I'm not your typical influencer, but I don't think I use Instagram as an influencer at all. I just use it as a place to be my Instagram. Anyway, check me out there if you want to check me out there. And remember to follow your haute, and you will find me. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye! Forever!